There are moments in life when you realize the people you thought loved you unconditionally were actually holding a secret scoreboard. And on that day, my wedding day, my parents didn't just show their score, they tried to burn mine to the ground. My name is Emily. I'm 28, and my sister, Jess, is 26. What happened between us during our weddings last year? It's something I still can't quite wrap my head around. It all started when Jess and I both got engaged around the same time. Yeah, talk about a weird coincidence, right? We'd both been with our boyfriends for a few years, and after some casual chats, we realized we were ready to take the plunge. Honestly, I was thrilled. The idea of planning a wedding alongside my sister, having our families there, experiencing all that joy together. I had this picture in my head of how magical it would be, a beautiful shared journey. But let me tell you, that excitement didn't last long. From the get-go, I could tell something was off. My parents had always favored Jess a little more than me, but I never imagined it would spill into something as monumental as our weddings. Jess is, and always has been, the golden child. She's the one who does everything right, gorgeous, super social, and she never seems to have a problem getting exactly what she wants from everyone around her. And as much as I hate to admit it, I've always been the quieter, more bookish, kind of shy one. I never really demanded attention the way Jess does. The first hint that things were going to get weird came when we started talking wedding planning. I was pretty laid back about it. I didn't have a dream wedding or anything, just something small, intimate, and affordable. Jess, on the other hand, was all about the big wedding. She had a Pinterest board ready, detailing every little thing, from the centerpieces to the designer gown she had her eye on. And here's where things started to get messy. As soon as Jess and I sat down with my parents to talk about the financials, the conversation took a strange, sickening turn. My parents immediately looked at me and said, "You know, sweetheart, Jess has always dreamed of this wedding, and she deserves the best. We want to make sure she gets everything she's ever wanted for her big day." I was confused. What about my wedding? I mean, we're both getting married this year. My mom gave me one of those smiles that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We'll help you too, sweetie. But you know, Jess has been through a lot. She's always been so responsible. She really deserves this." I just stood there for a moment, trying to process what was happening. My sister's wedding wasn't just a wedding, it was a full-on extravaganza. I was told my parents would cover a big portion of it, basically, whatever she needed. Her dream venue, 5-star catering, the couture dress. They went all in. I was honestly a little blown away. It felt like everything was falling into place for her, while I was just, well, I felt invisible. But here's the kicker. My parents didn't even offer to pay for my wedding. They barely gave me a fraction of the help they were giving Jess. When I gently asked about it, they kind of shrugged it off. "Oh, sweetie, we can't afford to help both of you at once. Jess has had more struggles in life, so she deserves it more." I couldn't believe it. My stomach churned. Struggles? Sure, Jess had a couple of rough patches, but nothing that compared to what I had been through. I had spent years working hard, supporting myself, constantly being the one who took a back seat in the family, never causing any drama. And yet, suddenly, I wasn't worthy of the same level of attention and care as my sister. At that point, I was just crushed. But I didn't say anything. I didn't want to cause a scene. I thought, okay, well, I'll make it work. I'll take out a loan if I have to. So, that's exactly what I did. I took out loans, racked up credit card debt, and worked extra hours to save up for the wedding I wanted. Meanwhile, Jess's wedding was becoming a massive affair. My parents were posting about it on social media, attending fittings, organizing the finest details. They even had the audacity to send me invitations to help out with Jess's bridal shower and rehearsal dinner, all the while barely acknowledging my own plans. Fast forward a few months before the wedding season. My big day was getting closer, and the tension between Jess and me was getting thicker. I started to resent how everything was so effortlessly falling into place for her, while I was scrambling to make ends meet for my wedding. And even though Jess seemed to know what was happening, she never once acknowledged it. Not even a, "Hey, I know things aren't exactly fair, but I appreciate your support," kind of conversation. Instead, she was fully wrapped up in herself. I should have said something earlier, but I guess I was just trying to keep the peace. That is, until everything came to a head the week before both weddings. Jess's wedding was scheduled for the end of June, and mine was in early July. Everything was set in stone, or so I thought. One afternoon, as I was running errands to finalize the details of my own wedding, I got a phone call from my mom. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice sweet but clipped, "we're sorry, but we won't be able to make it to your wedding on the day you planned. We have some issues with scheduling. Jess's wedding is more important, and we need to prioritize that. I hope you understand." I couldn't believe it. I almost dropped my phone. "Wait, what? You're not coming, Mom? It's my wedding." "Emily dear, it's just, Jess needs us more. You're more independent, you can handle it. But she's really been struggling with the planning and needs our full support." I stood there, stunned, trying to process what she was saying. My voice shook when I spoke next. "You're telling me you're not coming to my wedding because Jess's is more important?" There was silence on the other end of the line for a moment. Then, "Yes, sweetheart, it's just how things have to be. We'll be there for your anniversary, I promise. But Jess needs us right now." That was it. That was the moment when I realized I had had enough. I hung up the phone, staring at the wall, feeling the weight of the years of being overlooked, overshadowed, and taken for granted. And then something in me snapped. I wasn't going to let my parents or Jess treat me like this anymore. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. I started planning. I couldn't let this go. I wasn't going to show up at my own wedding to find my parents and sister walking down the aisle like they were royalty while I had been left in the dust. I was going to make sure they learned exactly what happens when you take your daughter for granted. But I needed to be careful. I didn't want to ruin my wedding, but I was done. I needed to teach them a lesson. The plan began to form in my head. Then came the day of Jess's wedding. The whole thing had been ridiculous, honestly. It was like something out of a fairy tale, but I couldn't even appreciate it because I felt so alienated. But I stayed quiet, put on my best supportive sister face, and went through the motions. Jess was glowing, the venue was beautiful, and my parents were completely wrapped up in it all, completely ignoring me. I was there, of course, but no one seemed to notice that I was slowly getting fed up. The reception came, and that's when I put the final touches on my plan. Jess and my parents were celebrating, the music was blasting, and the champagne was flowing. That's when I walked in, carrying my own wedding gown. As I entered the reception hall, the whole room seemed to stop. The music still played, but for a split second, there was this heavy silence that fell over everything. Jess was sitting at the head table with her new husband, looking all princess-like in her extravagant dress, chatting with our parents. And then all eyes turned to me as I made my way across the room, holding my wedding gown like it was the most natural thing in the world. It took a moment before anyone said anything. I was calm, but inside, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. I walked straight toward my parents. They were staring at me, their faces a mix of confusion and disbelief. "Emily, what are you doing with that?" my mom asked, her voice tight, though she tried to keep it light. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I placed the gown down on the nearest table. The guests were starting to murmur now, the tension palpable in the air. "I'm getting married," I said, my voice ringing clear and steady, "today." There was a stunned silence as people processed what I just said. My mom looked horrified, her eyes flickering between me and Jess, who was now staring at me, looking both confused and angry. "Sweetheart, I don't think this is the right time for jokes," my mom said, her tone faltering slightly. I shook my head, finally turning to look at Jess, whose face had started to redden in irritation. "No joke, I'm getting married today. I didn't want a huge wedding. I didn't ask for you to pay for my dream venue. But I was planning to marry the love of my life, and I had to do it without you. But well, here I am. I'm not waiting anymore. This isn't about you, Jess. It never was. Jess stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. What are you talking about? She snapped, her voice rising. This is my day, Emily. What are you trying to pull? I could feel the eyes of the guests on me, some sympathetic, some confused. But all I could focus on was Jess's furious face and the weight of everything I had been holding back. I'm not trying to pull anything, I said, keeping my voice steady. I just want to get married. I didn't want the wedding you had. I didn't want the loan debt, the stress, or the attention. I just wanted a peaceful day with the people who actually cared about me. And now I'm taking it back. Jess looked at my gown on the table, the absurdity of the situation sinking in. She opened her mouth to argue again, but before she could say anything, my mom stepped forward. Emily, you can't do this, she said, a desperate edge creeping into her voice. This is Jess's big day, you can't just. I can, I interrupted, my voice growing stronger. I've had enough of being treated like an afterthought. You've had years to show me that I matter. You didn't. And now you're shocked that I'm standing up for myself? I'm done being the quiet, good one. Today, I make my own choices, and I'm doing it without you. My father, who had been silent up until this point, finally spoke up. Emily, this isn't how you handle things, he said in a low voice, like he was trying to maintain control of the situation. You're being childish. This is your sister's wedding, and you're ruining it. I'm not ruining anything, I said, my heart racing. I'm finally standing up for myself. Maybe if you'd shown me even a fraction of the love and support you've given Jess, I wouldn't have to do this. I could see Jess's face turn redder by the second. She was furious, but she couldn't say anything because she knew, deep down, what I was saying was true. Our parents had always treated her like the golden child, and I had always been the one who had to keep quiet, go unnoticed, and just deal with it. But not anymore. I'm getting married, Jess, right now, I said. If you want to leave and let me have my moment, fine. But if you want to stay and make this more dramatic, that's on you. I'm done waiting for permission. My dad stepped toward me now, his expression stern. This is ridiculous. You can't just do this, Emily. You're being selfish. You really don't get it, do you? I said, shaking my head. You've always treated me like I don't matter, like my dreams aren't important. But you know what? I'm still doing this. I'm not asking for your approval anymore. I've had to fight for everything I've ever wanted in this family. And then I turned to look at the crowd, who had started whispering among themselves. Some of them looked uncomfortable, but others were nodding quietly, supporting me. I could feel their eyes on me, sensing the tension in the room. It felt like everything had been building to this one moment. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just about weddings. It was about years of being overshadowed. Years of walking on eggshells. Years of being told to be the bigger person when I'd never been treated like one. It wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was my chance to finally show everyone, especially my parents, that I mattered too. Just as I was about to take a breath and calm myself down, Jess stormed off, throwing an angry glance at me over her shoulder. Fine. Do whatever you want, Emily, but you'll regret this, she hissed before disappearing into the back of the venue. I turned back to face my parents, who were now standing there in silence, unsure of what to say. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Well, I said, my voice steady but loud enough for everyone to hear, I guess it's time to get married. And then I walked straight to the front of the room where I had arranged for my fiancé to be waiting for me. He was standing there, looking just as nervous as I felt, but there was a sense of calm between us. We had talked about this moment. He knew what was coming, and he stood by me no matter what. I turned to the crowd once again and smiled. Let's do this. As I reached the front of the room, I could see Mark, my fiancé, standing at the altar, his expression a mixture of nervous excitement and utter calm. He gave me a small smile as I approached, his eyes sparkling with love. And for a moment, everything else seemed to disappear. The noise from the guests faded, the drama with my family was pushed to the back of my mind, and all that mattered was the person standing beside me. Then, from the side of the room, I heard a soft clearing of the throat. A man stepped forward from behind the curtains, our officiant. It was a good friend of Mark's family, a guy named Tim, who had agreed to marry us on short notice. Tim had the kind of calm, collected vibe that instantly made you feel like everything was going to be okay, even when it felt like the world was falling apart. Tim smiled, stepping toward us. "Well, I think we're ready to get started. The rest of the guests are waiting, and from the looks of it, so are we," he said, his voice warm but with a hint of humor to ease the tension in the air. I nodded, trying to shake off the heavy weight on my shoulders. The whole situation was surreal. I had just confronted my parents in front of our entire extended family, and my sister had stormed off. But I was still here, standing in front of the person I loved, about to marry him, regardless of what was happening behind me. Mark gently took my hand as Tim began the ceremony. The guests, those who hadn't walked out in protest, settled into their seats, watching the proceedings with a mix of curiosity and confusion. But honestly, at that point, I couldn't have cared less. I was here, and I was marrying the love of my life. No one, not even my entitled parents or self-centered sister, could take that away from me. Tim started with the traditional vows, and as we recited them, I could feel my nerves begin to subside. My hand tightened around Mark's, a silent promise that this day was about us, not the drama that had preceded it. I looked at him, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. "I promise to love you," I said softly, my voice trembling slightly, "to stand by you no matter what happens, through the good, the bad, and the ridiculous family drama." Mark smiled, his thumb gently brushing against my hand. "And I promise the same, Emily. No matter how crazy things get, we're in this together." Tim continued with the ceremony, but for me, the words became a blur. This was happening despite everything. We were getting married. My heart beat a little faster with each word. Then came the rings. Tim turned to Mark first. "Do you have the ring for your bride?" I nodded, pulling the small velvet box from my pocket, handing it to Mark. He smiled and gently slid the ring onto my finger. It felt so surreal, but in the best possible way. I could feel the weight of it not just physically, but emotionally too. This was the ring I had dreamed about since I was young, but never in a million years did I think I'd be standing here, defying everyone who'd ever told me what I should want in life. "With this ring I thee wed," Mark said, his voice low and sincere, sealing the promise with a gentle squeeze of my hand. Tim turned to me. "And now, Emily, do you have the ring for your husband?" I smiled, pulling the matching band from the pocket of my dress. I placed it on Mark's finger, the moment feeling so simple yet so perfect. "With this ring I thee wed," I repeated, my voice a little stronger now. And just like that, it was done. We were married. Tim smiled warmly, stepping back. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Mark pulled me into his arms, and before I knew it, his lips were on mine. The kiss felt like an explosion of joy, a release after all the tension that had been building. It was everything I'd wanted, intimate, filled with love, and pure. Nothing mattered in that moment except the two of us. The room erupted into applause, some more enthusiastic than others, but the sound was almost drowned out by the pounding of my heart. I pulled back from the kiss, and we both smiled, turning to face our guests as they stood and clapped. I could see my mom and dad in the back, still standing, frozen, their faces a mixture of disbelief, disappointment, and, I almost couldn't believe it, envy. But I didn't care. Not anymore. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," Tim announced, his voice ringing out across the room. A few cheers broke out, and while some guests seemed to be unsure of what was happening, there was a small group of people who were genuinely happy for us. Friends from Mark's side, a few distant relatives, and even some family friends of mine who had always supported me. As we walked down the aisle, I glanced back toward my parents. My mom was wiping her eyes, and my dad had his arms crossed in front of him, looking upset. But there was something else, something I couldn't quite place. It was like they were regretting something, maybe realizing that they couldn't control this anymore. But I couldn't deal with them right now. I had to focus on Mark, on our future, on the fact that we had just done something that would last a lifetime. We made our way to the back of the room, the next phase of the reception about to begin. But as I passed by my parents, my mom grabbed my arm. "Emily, we need to talk," she said, her voice shaking, her grip tight. I turned to look at her, but I didn't say anything immediately. I had come this far. I had taken the leap. But part of me knew that this confrontation wasn't over. Not yet. "Later, Mom," I said, pulling my arm out of her grip. "Today is about me and Mark. I'll talk to you later." I turned my back on her, leaving her standing there in the aisle, her hands still outstretched toward me. As I walked away, I heard my dad's voice, sharp and bitter, cutting through the crowd. "Emily, this is not how we raised you. Do you understand that?" he called out, his words laced with anger. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I had spent too many years trying to meet their impossible standards, trying to live up to their version of what a perfect life should look like. And today, I wasn't going to let their disappointment ruin the best moment of my life. The sound of my dad's voice faded as I made my way to the reception area, where Mark was waiting. He saw me approach, his smile never faltering, and he took my hand in his. "You did it," he whispered, his eyes gleaming with pride. "You stood up for us." I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. This was real. It didn't matter what anyone thought. Mark and I had made a life together, and that was all that mattered. The reception went on without a hitch after that. There were a few awkward glances from some of the relatives, but no one dared to say anything in front of the other guests. Mark and I danced, we laughed, we celebrated. For the first time in years, I felt like I was finally in control of my life, my choices, and my happiness. But in the back of my mind, I knew the confrontation with my parents wasn't over. I wasn't naive enough to think they would just let it go. They would be angry. They'd make me feel guilty for choosing to live my life the way I wanted to. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to apologize for my happiness. The night drew to a close, and as we said our goodbyes to the remaining guests, I noticed my mom and dad slipping out of the reception hall early, their faces tight with resentment. They didn't even say goodbye to me. Not that I cared. I didn't need their approval, not anymore. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of new beginnings. Mark and I settled into our new life, and while I tried to keep in touch with my parents, the tension was unbearable. They didn't call to congratulate us on our wedding. There were no warm messages of support. Instead, they left passive-aggressive comments about how it wasn't too late to make things right. The silence between us was deafening, but I wasn't going to let their disappointment dictate my happiness. And then came the inevitable text from my mom one evening, just as Mark and I were sitting down for dinner. "I think we need to talk." I took a deep breath and looked at Mark. "This is it," I muttered, almost laughing at the sheer absurdity of it all. "I guess we can't avoid this conversation forever." Mark smiled, squeezing my hand. "Just remember, we're on the same team." The text turned into a series of calls over the next few days. My mom wanted to meet, to have a heart-to-heart, as she put it. I knew exactly what that meant. She wanted me to apologize for my choices, for going against her and Dad's wishes. She would try to manipulate me into thinking I had wronged them. But I wasn't backing down this time. Finally, the day arrived when I met with them. I didn't go alone. Mark was there for support, standing by my side, just as he promised. We sat down at a small cafe, and the tension in the air was so thick you could cut it with a knife. My parents' faces were a mixture of frustration and confusion. "We just don't understand, Emily," my mom started, trying to sound calm, but there was an unmistakable edge to her voice. "Why didn't you tell us about the wedding? Why didn't we get a say in how things went?" I couldn't believe the audacity. After all the years of ignoring my needs and preferences, they were acting like I owed them an explanation. "I'm not going to apologize for getting married the way I wanted to," I said, my voice steady but firm. "You guys made your choices for my sister, and that's fine. But this is my life. I did what felt right for me and Mark. You didn't have to pay for a wedding, and frankly, I didn't expect you to." My dad chimed in. "It's not just about the money, Emily. It's about family. Your sister deserved that big wedding, and you—" I cut him off, my anger bubbling to the surface. "You always thought she deserved more. You always made me feel like I wasn't enough. I didn't want your pity or your charity. I wanted respect." There was a long pause as the weight of my words settled over the table. My mom's eyes welled up with tears, but I didn't soften. I couldn't. Mark squeezed my hand under the table, offering silent support. My parents didn't say anything more after that. There was nothing else to be said. It wasn't the closure I had hoped for, but it was the closure I needed. I didn't need to win their approval anymore. I had my life, my love, and that was all that mattered. So, I guess that's the story of how my wedding turned into a massive family drama. It's been a few months since that day, and things are still tense with my parents, but I feel like I'm finally living for myself. The most important thing I've learned through all this? You can't always make everyone happy, but as long as you're doing what makes you happy, that's what counts.